Hate them? Love them? It doesn't really matter either way, because demos are a part of the game and they aren't going anywhere. Demos have been a bit of a hot topic in the community recently because they've been popping up just about everywhere. And it's being said that Rocket League is in a sort of demo meta right now. You see it in teams like Space Station, Dignitas, and faze, alongside a bunch of other teams who use the mechanic to give extra space to their mechanical players and let them go to work with the ball. Space Station is usually looking to clear space for Daniel, Dignitas does it for Joreuz, and faze does it for pretty much everyone on their team, because when you have Firstkiller, AJ, and Typical, there's not really a bad choice for who you can give the ball to. And demos are even becoming more popular outside of the pro level into ranked lobbies as well, which is probably due to YouTubers like Rocket Sledge and Woody showing how effective it can be to play this way. And honestly, it can be a lot of fun too, as long as you're not on the receiving end, because I swear sometimes I can't get more than a second on the ball before I get... Okay, you get it. So now, with people demoing more than they ever have before, I want to take a look at when all of this really got started, and then I'll talk about why it's so effective, and finally, we'll try to figure out the best way to counter them. I'll be talking about how the pros counter them, but hopefully, you'll be able to use those tactics at your level too. Alright, let's do it. So to start off, let's have another RLCS history lesson. Check out my video on Team Endpoint and Mets Norris if you missed the first one. We'll take it all the way back to Season 1 in 2016. At that time, demos were pretty rare. In fact, they were so rare that a lot of the time when a player got one, it felt like an accident. At that season's World Championship, Mike Rules had the most demos, with 0.77 a game, followed by Pashy, Jesse, Fireburner, and Turbo. And teams as a whole only averaged 1.18 demos during that event, which is really low. But let me show you exactly how low that is. In this graph, I've put together the average number of demos per game across all games in a given RLCS season, and I've also separated them by North America, Europe, and LAN events, so we can see how different parts of the world were affected. And as you can see here, there's been a steady increase in the number of demos across both regions and LANs, with some seasons having bigger jumps than others. This took us from 1.18 demos per game at the Season 1 World Championship, all the way to an average of nearly 3.4 at the most recent LAN in the 2021 Fall Major, nearly tripling the number of demos per game. The first surge happened here in Season 4. Before this point, no player in RLCS had averaged more than one demo a game, but now we see 5 players doing it in the regular season. In NA, we have Fireburner, Zane Jackie, Dapper, and Jacob, and in EU, we have Pondex. Ghost had built up the reputation as being the bump-heavy team, with Zane and the GOAT Classics leading the way in that regard. But in reality, NRG and Fireburner were the ones who led the region in demos, both as a team and individually in Fire's case, which is funny because he wasn't ever really known as the demo-heavy player. In fact, he was more known for his 50-50s, or as they were called in his case, 90-10s, since he won them that often. But he was also known for being one of the game's smartest players, which has helped him be a really good coach for Cloud9 and Version 1 after retiring from his playing career. And it makes a lot of sense for one of the smartest players to be one of the first to take on the playstyle that would dominate the game in the near future. At this point, the numbers continue to increase, but nothing too drastic happened across the board. But then we see another jump in Season 7, and then an even bigger one in Season 8. This season has a few more players that we can focus on. First, we have Arsenal being the first player in RLCS history to average more than 2 demos per game in the regular season, having 2.14. His arrival to Space Station brought in the bump-heavy playstyle that they have since become known for. And the other standouts were Team Reciprocity in Europe, with Farah and Fruity being first and second in the region in demos. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that a team in RLCS were looking to use demos to create space for a particular player, because at this point, their teammate Shawset was considered by many to be the best in the world. And while Fruity and Farah were both really solid and reliable, they didn't have the mechanics or ball skills of Shawset, so they always looked to enable him in any way possible. And one easy way to do that was demos. Finally, we have the last big jump in demos happening in Season X, where we had Firstkiller and Virtuoso leading the way in their respective regions. In Virtuoso's case, demos became his calling card, and he was known as the world's premier demo player. And Firstkiller is one of the most interesting cases that we have for demos up to this point. It was, and still is, pretty rare for the best player on your team to have the most demos, because usually, the player who's getting these demos is trying to clear space for the best player. In RLCS X, First led Rogue in just about every stat, but instead of teammates clearing space for him, he would clear for himself, and then he would dominate. His ability to do so many different things at such a high level was unparalleled, and that was the main reason why I thought of him as the best player in the world last season. And with that, we are finally caught up to the present day, where demos are so common that if your team doesn't use them at least a little bit, then you're probably falling behind. The best and most obvious example of the demo meta is Space Station, where Arsenal and Riddles have become 2 of the best demo experts in the world. They mainly use this mechanic to clear up space for Daniel to take advantage of whenever he gets possession of the ball, making it easier for him to score all of his goals. And while this is usually the part where I give you all the stats and highlights to back up that claim, I've already gone into plenty of detail about that in my last video, so be sure to check that out if you want more analysis on Space Station and their new superstar. Instead, we'll hop across the pond and look at Europe's best example of this playstyle in Dignitas. Joreuz is one of the most mechanical players in the entire world, and you often see Jack and Scrub clearing the way for him when they're trying to move up on offense. But they also do a great job of clearing space for each other when the time comes. Because when you have 3 of the best 1v1 players in Rocket League history all on the same team, you can be sure that they all know how to make the defense pay when they have room. In the fall split, Scrub and Jack were 3rd and 6th in demos respectively, while Joreuz was near the middle of the region in that stat, landing at 33rd, showing that he doesn't look for it as often as his teammates, but he's still able to get a demo every so often. This was most obviously seen in Game 3 of the Winter Regional against Team BDS, where every goal in that game came right after a bump or a demo. For the first, Killa rotates through the play and blows up extra, opening up space for Jack to throw an infield pass to Joreuz, who shoots it into the open net. Then, we have Joreuz blow up Mark as he rotates out of the play, making sure that he can't challenge Scrub, and Scrub is able to score the double tap shot from the sidewall. And finally, we have Scrub get another demo, this time on Mark by 8 after Joreuz is clear. The ball ends up being on target, and Extra can't make the awkward recovery needed to make the save. And to look at another example, Team Queso doesn't use them as often, but they still use bumps and demos really well to clear up space on offense, and Rise is usually the one leading the way in that regard. In the fall split, he led Europe in demos per game at 1.86, and a lot of them are to clear the way for his hyper-mechanical teammates in Joyo and Vatira. Oddly enough, in their regional win in Event 1, Vatira was the one that led the team in demos, while also arguably doing the most work with the ball. But when push came to shove in the grand finals, where the top 2 teams in demos faced off against each other in Dignitas and Queso, Rise once again rose to the top, and led the entire lobby with 2.25 demos a game. And the teams had 9.5 a game between the 2 of them, so that lobby was pretty much a fireworks show the entire time. And Rise would get his demos in the most conventional way possible, just running out ahead of the play and looking for any defender in his path. 2 perfect examples happen in Game 4, where for the second goal, Rise gets clear, and he runs out in front, paving the way for Vatira. He's able to blow up Jack, giving Vatira a bit of extra space to get the ball past Scrub and into the goal. And even if Rise didn't connect with the demos, the threat of it would still be enough to create the space that he'd need sometimes. For the very next goal in that game, Rise is running out ahead of the play again, this time to attack Joreuz. And to avoid it, Joreuz challenges the ball early, which does keep him safe. But the problem is that Scrub was expecting Joreuz to stay in net while he would go for the challenge. They double commit as a result, and to make matters worse, neither of them get a touch on the ball. So after it hits the backboard, Joreuz was able to come in for the easy goal. Now I've done a lot of talking about how demos can benefit a team on offense, and while they are seen there very often, using them while playing defense can be just as effective. A lot of players look for demos while they rotate back from their own offensive push, trying to stop the opponent's counterattack. Honestly, there are a lot of examples that I could use for players who do this, but one of my favorites by far is Mark by 8. He is well known for his ability to disrupt the opponent's play when they try to start an attack, and a lot of the time, he'll do this by demoing one of the players on the other team. These demos usually stall the opponent's offensive attack, and give Extra or Monkey Moon the freedom to move in and take the ball for themselves. That team is dominant defensively, but they probably wouldn't be nearly as good without Mark and his defensive demos. And we see that in action in this play against NRG in the fall major. It starts with Mark creeping into the play and cutting off the pass from Squishy to Garrett. The bounce goes out to Justin and he starts an air dribble while NRG moves up on offense. And after his first bit of disruption with the interception, Mark looks for even more, turning off ball cam and seeing who he can take out. And unfortunately for Squishy, he's the only one in the area. So Mark runs in and takes him out. Because of that, after Monkey Moon cuts off Justin's pass to Garrett, there's nobody for NRG to follow up on the play and maintain the ball pressure. So BDS takes the ball for themselves, and NRG's possession is over in only a few seconds. And another area where bumps and demos can be really effective on defense is using them to disrupt the player on offense who's trying to start a solo play. I've said before that there are 2 main ways to stop a solo play when it gets started. You can either hit the ball, or you can hit the player with the ball. And you could argue that hitting the player is even more effective because when they make a move to get the ball past the defender, the ball will most likely be heading towards the defensive side. So if the player making the move gets bumped or blown up and they can't make the follow-up hit, then it just turns into an easy pass to the defense for them to take over possession. But if they hit the ball instead of the player, then it turns into a 50, which gives the offense a bit more control over the play, and it's harder for the defense to react to what's going to happen, because a 50 can send the ball pretty much anywhere. And for this scenario, instead of the player that does the bumping, I'll focus on the one that gets bumped. Because one player that falls victim to it pretty often in these scenarios is AJ. AJ likes to air dribble. A lot. And he's really good at it too. so it's basically never a bad idea for him. If he gets the ball up in the air before you can challenge him, then good luck trying to stop him. But at the start of his air dribbles, he usually needs to slow down a little bit to get the proper setup. And during this setup is the best time for the defense to try to take him out of the play. Because if they do, then his touch for the air dribble setup is just a soft pass to their own team. This was a huge factor in FaZe's match against G2 in the RLCS X championships. At that point, FaZe was still AJ, Gyro, and Illusion. And AJ was without question the main source of offense for that team. G2 was looking better than they had all season, so if FaZe wanted to stand a chance of winning, AJ would need to play a great series. But G2 didn't let that happen. During the 2 series in that set, where they played a total of 7 games, AJ didn't score a single goal. G2 was always pressuring AJ right when he got possession, and whether they got a touch on him or the ball, it always worked to shut down solo plays, and he couldn't get any momentum on offense because of that. And this resulted in G2 easily taking the win. Alright, so now we've gone over the history of demos in the RLCS, and we've talked about how they're effective on offense and defense. So with all of that context out of the way, I think it's finally time to get to the part of the video that I talk about in the title. How exactly can we counter this demo meta? Are you guys ready for the answer? Alright, here it goes. I don't know. Thanks for watching. Nah, y'all see how much time is left in the video, you know I'm joking. But in all seriousness, demos are so prevalent because they're really effective. And if they were so easy to counter, then we wouldn't be seeing them nearly as much as we do. But since they're everywhere, that means that there's probably no easy fix. But I've done a lot of research and I've looked at a lot of film. So I'm ready to at least throw out some ideas about how we can counter all of this. And a lot of these ideas start with NRG. They haven't leaned into the demo meta nearly as much as other teams, but they're still at the top of the region, finishing second in the fall major behind Team BDS, and currently leading North America in the standings. So what exactly have they done to maintain their effectiveness? Well, first, I feel like it needs to be said that NRG doesn't get nearly as many demos as other teams, but they've definitely tried before. As Garrett even said so himself after the Regional 1 Grand Finals.
I think that last game I said, I'm just going to go for demos off the rip here, and then I got like 1 or something. It's hard to make it a habit when you haven't done it for, you know, it used to be like Classics was the only guy doing it, and we were like, oh, yeah. Classics getting a cheap demo, you know, Classics, the GOAT. But it's just hard to make it a habit.
But even though NRG didn't get nearly as many demos as Space Station in that series, their attempts would still throw off the defense just enough to get some easy goals. Because with Arsenal and Rebels being so aggressive on offense themselves, they'd leave Daniel on defense alone pretty often. And if you can hold off Space Station's offensive push, Daniel will probably have to fight off the counterattack by himself. So if you can throw him off, you can probably score. And that was exactly the case on this play. Rebels and Arsenal were upfield committed to the offensive play, with Daniel back behind them. But Justin gets the ball and air dribbles it upfield, taking it over the 2 attackers. And with Garrett on the other side of the field, he heads straight for Daniel. This makes Daniel take a really wide angle to goal. And he even jumps up to the back wall, all to avoid Garrett's potential bump. By the time Daniel does all of that, he's not even close to being able to make the save. But this video is supposed to be about countering the demo meta, and doing it yourself doesn't really count as countering it.
It was said that you would destroy this and not join them!
So what else did they do to fight against them? One thing that stood out to me in this series is how well they crashed the net when they were on defense. So even if one player was taken out, the defense was never too unsettled because there's always somebody else there to cover the spot. Like in this play, where Justin clears the ball and NRG has no chance of following up. So they hang back and set up on defense for the upcoming possession. So now, even when Squishy is taken out by Redos and Daniel passes up to Arsenal, by the time the pass connects, Garrett and Justin have both sides of the net covered, with Garrett on the back wall and Justin in front of the goal. When the offense gets close, Garrett's able to jump off and get the clear, and NRG lives to fight another day. To be fair, when NRG does this, an option for a midfield pass does open up sometimes. And it looks like Arsenal tried to go for that, looking for another touch on the ball after it bounces off the ceiling. In a similar fashion to Extra's ceiling double tap infield pass that he pulled off in the fall major. But this is a really hard play to make, and Arsenal can't quite pull it off this time. So that demo play wasn't too complicated for them to deal with, but that philosophy works for NRG even when things get a bit out of control, like they did here. After Justin respawns off a demo, he and Garrett are in the defensive corner while Space Station has the ball. Squishy gets in Arsenal's way, forcing him up the wall, but as they come back down, Arsenal gets his revenge and blows him up. Meanwhile, Garrett and Justin are slow to challenge Redos. Because of that, Justin is forced into an awkward corner read, and he misses the touch, while Garrett tries to rotate back to the goal. But after demoing Squishy, Arsenal continues his rampage and pushes Garrett out of the goal. This seems to leave it wide open for Space Station, but because of Justin's perfect recovery on the back wall, he's able to run back to the goal and break up the play before it's too late. This is basically what Space Station dreams of when it comes to their offense, blowing up one player and bumping another out of the goal entirely. But because of how defensively positioned the whole team was, and Justin's ability to use his mechanics to recover the goal, NRG still keeps the ball out of their net. Now this is how NRG responds to demos whenever they happen far back in defense. But when they happen in the midfield, they have a different response to it, because you can't really crash the net when the play is that far away from the goal. It would give the opponents too much space to work with and let them set up a threatening scoring chance. So instead, they'll do the opposite, and they'll push up into the offense's face, and not give them any space despite being down a man. Whenever a teammate is demoed in the midfield, they just treat it like a part of their rotation. Whoever got demoed is now the third man, and it'll take them 3 seconds to finish their rotation. So the next man up needs to buy enough time for that rotation to happen. And in this case, it's Squishy, fresh off the respawn. Normally after a respawn, that player will stay in the third man position. But after Garrett gets demoed in the midfield, Squishy rushes up to Reddles and closes down that space. And since he needs to buy time for Garrett, he does what few players in the world do better than him, and that's fake challenge into shadow defense. This forces a weak touch out of Reddles, and by the time the ball reaches their net, Garrett's already back and ready to save it. And he even throws a nice pass to Justin. All of these strategies to counter demos on defense are cool enough on their own. But what makes it even cooler is that NRG doesn't resort to demos for their own offense that often. And as Garrett said earlier, even if they do, they usually don't do it as effectively as other teams. In the fall split, NRG was only 9th in demos per game, behind teams like Ghost, Torrent, and E United. With bumps and demos, teams are looking to clear space and give their offense more room. But NRG is good enough on offense that they don't need to use bumps and demos to create extra space on offense, and instead they operate in the space that they already have, even if it doesn't look like they have much to work with. Squishy beats Daniel on the 50, and NRG moves up to attack. After a weak clear attempt, Justin comes in and immediately puts on 2 more shots, making Reddles' awkward position on the backboard even more uncomfortable. Justin steals the 100 boost on the left, and the ball bounces off the sidewall right back into the middle, where Garrett can take the next shot after his short rotation from stealing the right boost. It's saved again, but at this point, SSG is completely out of boost, thanks to the steals from Garrett and Justin. And if any Space Station player tries to challenge the ball, they'll probably get beat. Because of that, they have to sit in goal and try to save the shots when they come in. This creates extra space in front of the goal that NRG can take advantage of, and they were able to create it without using demos. Squishy goes for an infield pass to Justin, but it's slightly out of his reach, and Reddles can't get any power when he tries to clear the ball, which goes straight to Garrett in front of the net. The chance for another shot is there, but since Reddles and Arsenal are both positioned in net, Garrett goes for an even better option. He sends the ball up to the wide open backboard, and usually this means a double tap shot, but instead he hits the ball off to the side and follows it out there, which again vacates the space in front of the goal. Off the backboard bounce, Garrett gets around it and throws the pass right back into the middle of the field, where Justin is now waiting for it after he rotated straight into that space after leaving the goal. The pass is perfect, and Justin shoots it right down the middle of the net, right between both defenders. Because of their great ball pressure, boost stealing, and decision making, NRG got all of the space they needed, without needing to use a single demo. So demos are good, but NRG is better. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I did not think I'd be able to talk about demos for that long, and yet here we are, after almost 19 minutes. And the wild part is that there's still a lot I could have said, like how risky demos can be if you do it at the wrong time and compromise your defense, or how sometimes a bump can be better than a demo because the player won't immediately spawn on the defensive side. But we can save all those for another discussion. And until that time comes, as always, thanks for watching.